Greetings, gamers, and welcome to the 148th live stream from the Misfit Gamer Studios. I'm your host, Vortex, and this is D&D Discussions. On today's episode, we're going to do a piggyback off of last week's episode where we did the history of dragons, and now we're going to look at the history of Dragonborns. Felt it was going to be a nice little, cooperative history of, or a little back-to-back. And then we'll get back into some more experimental stuff, probably starting next week. But thought it would be kind of fun to do a history of the Dragonborn since we know it's not going to be terribly long. We even kind of saw some of the remnants of it in our last week's episode, just because they're so intertwined with dragons that, of course, we couldn't help but mention them. So other than that, we have some new emotes that are going on right now. We just launched a couple of them. So all of the free emotes for everybody in chat, all of them have been replaced with our base emotes. And then I have put a couple extra ones in tier 1 and tier 2. But also those are all available in Discord as well. So if you're interested, join the Discord and you can have access to all 12 of our emotes.
Facts, man.
So fascinating.
Very cool, dude.
Never thought
Very
I'd have my own emotes of my own individual avatar. It's crazy. But other than that, no major updates from me. What about you? Any updates that we need to be aware of?
Nope. I sadly wasn't able to do much streaming this week. This first week back from vacation has been much busier than I anticipated, and
It'll do that. It'll sneak up on you. You
Very
think
much
everything's
so.
gonna be low key, and then just suddenly
like,
there's stuff to do.
bro, Nah, but it's grand. It's grand. So I'm here for it. Hopefully, I might get to do a little bit this weekend, but this weekend's gonna be a little busy for me. But outside of that, we'll try to get back to the regular groove of things. But
Yeah. We'll be fine.
yeah,
We'll get
I'm
into
happy to
it.
be here. So it's a good deal, man. It's a very good deal.
Anything in the background that the folks need to know about submission wise? Any changes?
Not a whole lot. I'm doing some maintenance myself on the structure. I've noticed that I just constantly keep forgetting to move stuff over so that the rest of the community can have access to the after reviewed items. So I'm doing some restructuring so it'll make it easier for that process to happen. So the second we're done reviewing something, boom, everybody should have access to it and be able to see it and pick it up and use it for however they need to. So
That's weird.
yeah, let me know if you guys have any issues with the leaderboard, if everything's copacetic, if everything works well. Any testing and helpful information on that would be very, very helpful. And yeah, that's it, man. That's pretty much where we're at. I'm slowly making progress with everything else.
Why did that go off 18 minutes in?
Yeah, we did just hit 18 minutes.
Okay, let's bring that back up to 3, maybe. That's weird. These shouldn't be posting this quickly and this soon. I just set some new time frames so they would post.
Oh, you're talking about stream elements.
Yeah, they're supposed to post
Gotcha.
like periodically throughout the stream because I noticed that they were starting to double up all the time. And so I try to change that. And now, like, that's not even like the earliest was 25 minutes. So I don't even know why at 18 it's automatically like flagging.
Interesting.
So yeah, I gotta go mess with that. We have a leaderboard for all of the homebrew Hoylapa. Well, we actually have 2 leaderboards. We have the homebrew leaderboard for all of the rankings for all of the homebrew submissions that we've gotten. And then, of course, there is a leaderboard in Twitch where you can see how much points that you've earned.
That's true.
So there's
That's
technically 2 leaderboards.
And theoretically, there's one in Discord because everybody levels up every once in a while in Discord.
Yeah, there's
If you wanna
technically
call that a
some sort of
leaderboard.
ranking and the bot ranking. So yeah, that'll be fine. What do we have on Monday? What is Monday's item?
Monday's item is actually going to be a submission by Cosmic, the jurisdiction. See, I don't even know if I'm reading this right. If you go check in the schedule channel, I have the actual name in there. I want to say Apofrica, something like that. Last time I feel like I said Apofrica, and we were talking like it was gonna
Like apothecary?
Yeah,
Mhm.
but I could have read that wrong. Cosmic, if you're in chat, please correct me. there's a phonetic way to articulate that, but I feel like it's I don't want to say like Egyptian, but it's some kind of very interesting name that
Interesting.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it. I like most of Cosmic Submission, so this one should be no different.
Very nice. And Soul just solidified the February community stream, so that is now official.
Oh yeah,
We have officially got the
wild
February
already.
community stream.
Soul, you are
And how many streams did that take? 3?
three. A total of this is the third stream.
So I might
Goodness
have to
gracious.
increase this if I want to make it more competitive. 'Cause
Either that or just lower the amount that each person can
individually do per stream.
per stream. Like
Mm.
maybe 500. You know,
Because then it would require more people more often
more
than
people
just
to
one
contribute
person.
because we really want, like, if we get it in 2 days because 10 people are watching in those 2 days,
That's
like,
true. That's
I'm
one
okay
thing.
with that, you know.
But if we only get
But-
it in 2 days because one person really wants it, it's
Because
like, is that
Soul is
really
giving all of his
is it really a community stream at that point? Just
but
saying.
it's a good deal. It's definitely a good deal. We appreciate you guys for sure.
I mean, it's not like we don't want to do them. I mean, let's
Of course.
face it. That's why
I want to do another. I want to do another one of our what's it called? I better remember these.
Yeah,
Names.
so you basically carry the community streams pretty much 90% of the time. If I didn't put a
Facts.
cap, you'd probably buy them like instantly every week.
Let me
You
just pay for the whole thing.
yeah, let me just like boom, you're doing a community stream. Boom, boom, happening.
It's happening. Well, I finally hit my 50K mark on the on my XP.
Oh, you got your own little pool there.
Yeah.
Finally out.
I mean, I don't
50K.
really have much to use it for. If I vote for these community streams, then it takes away from their opportunity to contribute. So
Yeah, that's why I
I'm
try to
just
stay
saving
out
up
of it
and-
as much as I can, especially when it comes to like polls and everything.
yeah,
The way I look
same.
at it is, if I've given the option, I want it. You know what I mean? That is my vote. If I say, do you guys want A or B? I'm not going to put something up there that I don't want. So
Mhm.
technically my vote is A or B. You know what I mean? Like, for me, it's kind of that whole thing of, it's kind of pointless to provide options and then provide an opinion.
Fair.
I want to be the unbiased result. I want to be the, just like with the reviews and everything, I want to be the one that just kind of sits back and just figures it out after.
Sees what happens.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to see what everyone wants. So you still have
Fair.
5,000 points. Well, of course you do. I think you just have just an unlimited number.
I mean,
But-
you do gather the most out of the majority of the people in our community. So I'm here for it.
All right. Well, what do we
Flex your
have?
commitment.
Oh yeah, Cosmic coming in with 8,000 points. And we just got text to speech up, everybody. So back at 5,000 points, 5,000 XP will get you text to speech. We finally got those working. I don't know what happened. I think because it looks like the app got a major update. The sound
interesting.
alerts got a major
Gotcha.
update. There's a bunch of new voices and some new settings. So I think
Okay.
I was just trying to use it during one of their transition phases.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully it will be much better now. We'll actually hear that. And if we don't, I'll make sure to refund it and not click,
Yeah,
collect on
fair
it. So
enough.
we won't have any kind of debacle like we did last time.
I remember that.
That was unfortunate, but all right. So what are we here for today? We are here for the history of Dragonborn. So we did last week's history of just dragons in general, which I thought was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed last week.
That was good. That was very good. I got to learn a lot more about dragons and their history and how they even came about. And they weren't always anthropomorphic like I assumed. And so like,
Right.
there's a lot more to their history and their development into what D&D is. So it was very cool. It was very cool.
There was a really good video I watched. I posted it in the Discord. If you guys want to join, link is in chat. So in the Discord, in the community chat, I posted a video. It's 50 minutes long. It's actually one of the longer YouTube videos I've ever suggested to people. But it was so... It's not even like well high produced. It's just kind of like us. It's just some dude just talking about D&D like us.
Mhm.
But he went over the more out of game history of the development of the game itself, and specifically the transition from OD&D to second edition, and some of the goes over a lot of big revelations about that time frame. Most notably, he discusses the fact that D&D wasn't officially truly a game until second edition. Like before that, it was never actually a game, nor was it meant to be one. It was a collection of suggested rule sets in order for people to develop a narrative, basically a TTRPG. But in and of itself, he goes over the
Interesting.
fact that it itself was not a game. It was a bunch of people trying to come up with this idea because he started with chainmail, which is basically a pamphlet, a couple pages, right?
Hmm.
That's what they started on. They took examples and they took reference from other places and they built a narrative based story, right? Because it's coming off the heels of a lot of the war games, which were basically just military tactic games. You had an army, I had an army, and we just you said what
Kind of
you were
like
doing.
what's that game where you actually have little minis and stuff?
There's
But
Warhammer, which was
yeah,
another
yeah, yeah.
derivative of it, but before D&D, before Warhammer, it was basically military tactic, like levels, right? I would have an army as like the battle master. You would have an army, and you would discuss what your army is doing and the things that you would do, and I would basically just roll a bunch of dice behind the screen and then tell you if you were successful or not, right?
Okay.
And that's what evolved eventually into the first levels and the first era of D&D. But it was less of a full game and more of just a collection of things they had tried and they continued to use. But remember, it was mostly just a friends group, trying to make this thing a little bit more accessible.
Right.
And one of the key focuses throughout the entire like episode is he just keeps coming back to the fact of, to this day we still have these arguments, and all the arguments basically boil down to one question that we're still asking ourselves from the very very beginning to 5e24. The question that we all have is, how do you play this game? That's the entire 50-minute video of him explaining why that is still a question, because essentially, long story short, it's because it never was. It was never defined in the first place. Before second edition, it was just here's a couple examples of things that we've done. This is how, and this is how we do it. But the problem was because there was no succinct, guaranteed rule sets, right?
Hmm.
Like first edition didn't even have an explanation on how you gained spells or how many you could have. There was no limit. It was literally, there were no limits. It was just wizards have spells. He even goes over the fact of stats, why people
Interesting.
argue about whether or not you should roll intelligence, and if you roll low, you should, play dumb, or people that argue against the fact that just because your intelligence stat is low, there are some people out there who don't believe that means you're dumb. So, and there's two dichotomies.
Right,
Since
right,
the very,
right.
very beginning, there's some people who don't even believe in playing a character. They believe that your stats are there for the dice purposes, but you are the intelligence. It's DM versus players, not DM versus characters. And there's the other
Interesting.
side of that dichotomy, which is, I am playing a game through this character, like you and I say, I'm playing my character.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And there's always been a fight on both sides. And he goes into a lot of amazing examples of the old, like the research I wish I could do. He goes back into the old way where right now, we go on forums and we go on websites, right? We go to D&D Beyond, look at comment sections.
Hmm.
Back in the day, there was just D&D magazines that you wrote into.
Sure.
So a lot of the discourse was happening in these magazines, and he goes through a lot of examples. He reads these really old articles from diehard, like people like us who wanted to get their voice out there, but didn't have a platform. So they would literally just send in letters to these magazines. And so he got to read off a lot of these arguments from the 70s and the 80s, and they sound like arguments today. And he's
Interesting.
basically talking about how the rules just constantly got developed and added onto, but it was never really solved in the sense of, how do you play? Like, that's the reason why there is no distinct rule set of, you play like one example of people who tried to make sense of the game came out with a pamphlet, almost like what we would call module now, and their way of describing it was purely travel based. It was, for X number of time traveling, you roll this number of die every X number of hours based on the terrain you're
For like
in.
encounters and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
it was like based on the terrain. So they
Hmm.
gave a list of terrain, whether it was day or night, and it said roll this many die, roll this die for every X amount of hours, depending on the terrain and the time of day. And this is the roll for an encounter. This is the roll for not an encounter. Once you resolve the encounter, continue traveling. That
Hmm.
was how, and that was literally because their entire thing was because there were no rules. This was someone's first attempt at publicizing how to play D&D. The very first like official printout of someone trying to explain how to play D&D was just purely, you were going from point A to point B roll dice every X amount of in-game time. Resolve encounter, move on. That was it. So it's like some people were, and so there was arguments about like, oh my God, that's exactly how I play D&D. I've been playing the game correctly this whole time. And there are other people who would write in and go, what are you talking about? Like, where are the towns? Where are the NPCs? Where's the mystery? Like, where's the
life? Where's the adventure?
Where's the adventure? It's like, you just show up and you just roll dice. Oh, no adventure. No adventure. Oh, attack. Okay. And so it's amazing. That entire video is just, it's such a great way to understand why D&D is the way it is now, but it's also a great bridge for anybody who wants to understand why people like us who have played in the older editions, why we approach D&D the way we do, why we storytell the way we do, why we, why we think the game has merit in the way that we play it versus what other people play it, and why we have such an open mind of there is no wrong way as long as you're having fun. Exactly. And that's quite literally baked into the history of D&D. And you were kind of confused when I say it wasn't a game until second edition. So the funny part is the only reason second edition is so convoluted, complicated, and seemed to go from like 0 to 60 compared to, the first edition is because Gygax was kind of fed up with everybody making their own rules and decisions on how to play his game. Like, essentially, it was all of these people were making these pamphlets and being like, hey, here's how I play. Hey, here's how I play. Here's a list of how, like, this, again, there's these like pamphlets of people who were publishing it. And he was like, wait a second, this is mine. You're not allowed to make, because he was flattered, but but on the other hand, he's like, but it's mine. I make money off of this, not you.
Yeah.
So he came out with second edition AD&D, and it was intended purely not for here's how I play and here's my ideas. It was his final way of saying, fine, if you guys have to make up your own rules and you're going to make money off of me, I'm going to tighten up all of the loose ends. And he made second edition primarily just to be somewhat structured in a way to shut everybody up. So people would stop making money and stop making content off of his shit. So D&D, the second edition, he's even, you can even go
or basically to, at least say like, that's yours, this is mine.
Well, yeah, but
like, I mean, people do that now. They're still making like content.
But his way was like to kind of basically say that D&D now has hard and fast rules. You guys don't have to make up your any. His whole point was stop going to other people to play my game.
Interesting.
You should have to come to me. And he's even quoted in interviews when directly asked, like, is second edition rule set how you and your people play? Because, when you think about like how it started, right, it sounded like a lot of rules based on their adventure, right? I mean, Greyhawk was based on their original setting. So all of these things were like just being added as they figured it out. As they made decisions and liked them, they wrote it down and said, oh, that's how we're going to do magic spells now. Oh, I really like how you did that critical. Let's say that a 20, you know what I mean? Like, they did, actually 20 isn't even a critical, but you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
They added these things as it made sense. But second edition was them just being like, all right, answer every fucking question. So even when they asked him, is second edition like your rule sets? Do you actually use all of these rules? Have you used all of these rules? And he goes, basically on record saying, oh no, I made that to have people stop deciding what my game was and to not make money off of me. And he admits that his DMing style, Gary Gygax, is literally, I just roll dice behind the cover just to make my players think it's important. Like, he basically says, second edition is not my rule set. Second edition was just so I could solidify my game.
What this is.
And he just says, I'm the kind of DM, I literally just roll dice to make my players afraid and think that it matters. Like, he literally just rolls fake dice.
That's freaking hilarious.
So people who have a problem with second edition, I get it, right? Like, I've always said, second edition is convoluted for a lot of reasons, but it makes sense when you look at it from the prism of why they created second edition. And then from there, what did they do? They finally finished the game in a sense. And then what did third edition do? Third edition fixed everything. They took all of the broken aspects that he didn't fully think through, but just made a ruling for. And then third edition stress tested it and said, here's all the things that should stay.
Now, was a lot of that third edition, all the supplementary editions, was that him as well?
He was part of it, but that's where Wizards of the Coast and that's, like Pathfinder was an offshoot. It got bigger, right? He actually had a game, he had a company, but it got bigger. It got beyond him. And if you think about it, from third edition, that's when the official game, stopped being about what makes sense and sharing what we've done And from second edition, starting with really third and 3.5, it became more. Oh, hey, Tekate, thank you so much for the 10 bits.
Hey, wonderful. Thanks, brother.
The idea behind third edition really being the very beginning of making this game tangible to the masses.
Yeah.
So you had OD&D and first edition, just these guys trying to share their vision, trying to share this idea of a game, getting fed up to the point to where they're like, fine, let me just finish the game so you guys can stop making up your own rules. And then someone came along, the company, TOS and Wizards of the Coast were like, wait a second, we have a full game now. Well, let's refine it. And that's where third edition began. Third edition began refining the rules up until 3.5, which made more revisions, better understanding of the lore. We've talked about this in every history of.
Yeah.
Fourth edition tried to go the gamer, the video game route,
Very
and then
much so.
fifth edition is now just trying to make it as cookie cutter and as direct as people can. So when you pick it up and play, and you go somewhere else, you can still pick it up and play the same game. Whereas before, we understand that that's not how it used to be, because everybody played a different game. And that's why even today, getting a gaming group that vibes with your idea of D&D can be difficult, because not everybody truly has a mindset, on how this thing is played.
Yeah.
But it was such a great video of just all of the things that he discussed.
I'm actually very interested to watch. I still have that video. I wasn't 100% sure what it was.
Yeah.
But
If you've ever wanted to know how and why I think of D&D the way I do, I mean, I wasn't alive in the 70s for any of this, but a lot of this is very similar to the way I got into D&D. The influences that got me in, my DMs, the people that I talked to about D&D, and just the way that I've come to understand it. It's so funny to listen to him talk about the history long before I was ever a part of it, and just feeling so connected to it, feeling so much like, yes, this is exactly how I think of D&D. And it's funny that this is how it's always been. You know what I mean? From the very beginning, people have the same arguments about what you should do. And at the end of the day, even back then, it was the consensus. Even one of the articles you read, someone's tried to stop the argument by being like, does it matter? If you had fun, does it matter? And that's kind of our argument, is like, does it matter? As long as everyone's having fun, like, does it actually matter?
Exactly.
So it's one of those things where I really look forward to I really look forward to seeing more of the community's like reactions as D&D continues to shift, because 5e24 seems to have a lot of benefits, but the more you dig in, the more I'm starting to wonder if 5e has a bit of a vocal minority kind of problem, where there's a lot of like, it feels like there's a lot of consensus in 5th edition, but I wonder if that's because there's just a smaller group of very loud voices being able to represent these ideas as we're all getting along. But is that really the case? Is 5e really as good? You know what I mean? Like, it's accessible. We all know that. It's cookie cutter. We know that. But with the lengths that we've seen and even discussed here on stream of how people play, is it really the universal game that everyone makes it out to be? Or is that just that small group who are so vocal and they love it that they kind of drown out anybody who's kind of...
I'll say it feels like they are definitely the loudest. And so a lot of the times it's what we see the most. Like, you think about like the news media, like you see all these like terrible, but is it really, when you look around at like the grand scheme of things, is everything really that scary? Or are they just always showing you the scary things? So it's always the first thing in your face. So I feel like a lot of the times that's what this is. It's like, yeah, we all agree. Obviously it's this way. And they almost, I don't want to say gaslight people. They almost try to like trick people into feeling like this is the norm. And if you think different, then you're just obviously not using common sense.
And that's what I mean, right? Is like, part of me wonders, because there's also not necessarily, it's like a cousin to FOMO. There's not really a word for it, but it's like the cousin to FOMO, where it's the reverse coin, right? FOMO is the idea of like you always want to be up to date with something because you don't want to
Yeah.
miss it. But there's also the reverse of that coin where, you know, I don't want to say it's uncool to like older things, but with something like D&D, there is a very big mindset that once it gets updated, you kind of just move on, right? Like even right now, there's a lot of DMs that are afraid of having to transition because there are players out there who even again, I'm seeing it on TikTok. There are people out there who are already just ignoring that 14
Even
was a
existed.
decade old. Like people are just like, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. If you read it in the book, this is how it works. And it's like, bro, chill. It's been like 4 months and we have an entire 10 years to overcome. But people are so dead set on it's been updated, therefore everything before it is obsolete. And those are where I'm just like, I really do wonder, like, when it comes down to it, is the vocal minority as well as that reverse of FOMO where it's that whole, do people really like fifth edition and really believe it's like the best absolute version, or is it just everyone agrees that it's the most accessible and it's the most prevalent,
I feel
so
like
it's the easiest?
there are, and this just might be my perspective, but I feel like extra specifically the what I will call uber rules lawyers just need rules to lawyer.
Yes.
And so if they're like using anything, they just have to be able to say this is what the rule book says, and they need to have something that is their foundation for that, right? If there's an option, if there's a or if there's a could be, then what's the lawyer? Then it's
Yeah.
just like, well, then it could be or it could not be. But like, no, I need to be able to tell you you're wrong because of X, Y, and Z.
Right. And it
And
comes down to like rules lawyery is like the first toe dip into min maxer, right? Like, I
sure,
mean,
sure.
realistically, to be a min maxer, you have to be a rules lawyer because you have to know what it is. But it's funny. It's like if you like a min maxer has part of the rules lawyer in them, but again, it's like it. I always come back to that whole player entitlement
Hmm.
because it's that mindset of it. The rules lawyer, the min maxer, people who again, the vocal minority of people who absolutely decree that fifth edition is the best. I think a lot of it is because in all of the other versions, you had to play the game in order to earn stuff. You actually had to play the story, you had to progress through it. But we've talked about this before with fifth edition, there's an entitlement of I know what I get, so give it to me. Right? I know how this is supposed to work, let me have it. And it even comes down to it's like I've played so many games. I've played for hours with shitty dice rolls and still been invested in the story, still been invested in the game. But I honestly can't. I've lost count of how many people get 2 or 3 shitty dice rolls and the entire game is ruined. Like literally, they just want to either get a new character or just stop the gaming session because the game is ruined. Because again, what they planned is not happening because of something they can't control. And instead
So
of rolling with it, they're like, nope, this is not how I
on
want.
that
This is
point,
not what I want in the game.
I have been playing a game for like a while with some of my old military friends from back when I lived in Indiana. And I have this artificer that I'm using, and we're using like the new 2024 rules and all that stuff. This artificer has just got her third level feature where she's an armor and she can now like basically turn on her Iron Man suit,
Yep.
right? And she's got like two different versions of the armor. One's like a slightly bulkier one, and one's like more of like a slim, like better at stealth type one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the better at stealth type one has this built-in ranged attack, and it's kind of like a repulsor blast. Every single time I have donned this version of the suit and I have used this repulsor blast, every single time I have missed. Every time. I have yet to be able to use it. And instead of just being mad, now don't get me wrong, I am mad that
Mm-hmm.
it has not gone off. But instead of just doing that, like I use it as an opportunity to like in game be like, okay, this character just created this thing and it's supposed to work this way and it's firing and everything's technically going off, but it's always missing. It's always misfiring. So she feels like there's something wrong with her creation. And so she's now like
Mm-hmm.
investigating like what's going on, how it's working. and like using it in game in the story of the game to try and bring out more depth of character, right?
Which I love, and that's where the nuance of old style game versus new style gameplay, because this is a perfect segue. This is not even what we meant to talk about, but fuck it, this is what we're talking about. I'm also simultaneously trying to figure out why Cosmic Sub didn't come through, because we didn't get the sub.
I thought he did it before stream.
Oh, is that what happened? Maybe he did.
I don't know. Maybe
Cosmic, did you do that on stream or before stream? I'm just trying to figure out why it didn't.
I did mine before stream, and I know it didn't. I mean, theoretically we were streaming, but it was before we actually.
Yeah, I didn't see it go off, and usually it even tells me that someone has resubbed. Yeah, because I got Hecate 7 days ago, but I haven't gotten another update. So that's weird that Twitch isn't updating me.
Wild.
Oh, I just realized that no one's been able to hear ChillHop this whole time.
Wild.
All right, so we're talking about this. What was I saying?
We were talking about my little getting involved into the story.
So this is where there's that nuance of old school gameplay versus new school gameplay, and it goes back to what we've talked about before, which is my big issue. One of my trigger words. You know what I mean? Like this is my big pet peeve is don't say this in my campaigns because I hate this word. But flavor text.
Yeah.
And that's the nuance, because I think a lot of new players, and even like not new like 5th edition players and 5th edition DMs, I feel like the nuance of storytelling and narrative integration is lost on 5th edition. And again, it's not against the players or the DMs, but it's against the edition itself. Because there's a lot of the mentality that, what you're doing, what she's doing, right? Trying to in-game figure out why it's not working. To me, that means something different than just enriching the narrative. Because someone in the more modern 5th edition mindset, especially most DMs, would take that and go, okay, cool, that sounds cool. Like you're tweaking with it, you're fiddling with it, that's cool. You're still getting shit rolls and it's still not gonna work. So at the end of the day, yes, you're enriching the story, you're making a more in-depth character, but at the end of the day, you're doing absolutely nothing. There is no benefit, there is no progress to be made.
Theoretically, yes.
You could have literally said nothing and the game will not be any different, except for your individual insight into your character. That's what I call the more modernized gaming set, because that's exactly how 5th edition has done it, right? We have so many rules covering absolutely everything, people don't need to think. So therefore, it's easy to again, it's that whole thing of it, if it's either entitlement or it's just easy to just follow the rules, right? Sure. But with the older mindset, with the older games, everything basically before 4th edition, right? Even 3rd edition had this, where, and it's why I do it, where if you're the artificer and you're just getting shitty rolls, but I would try to put in that it's not just a cosmic, mythological, 5th dimensional decision that's being made outside of your character, right? It would be in the story. And if you say, I'm going to go and tweak my, my tool, and I'm going to learn more about it, and I'm going to go figure out why it's not working, I'm going to take that as like your character's actually going to figure something out in the world, right? Like I look at dice rolls as something actually happens, something in the world. It's not some metaphysical, metagame thing. Your dice roll is something, again,
it's not just RNGs is saying yes or no,
right? It's like again, a miss isn't a miss. A miss is just you didn't do enough damage. But a miss isn't that you don't have talent. It's not that you just forgot how to fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't watch, martial arts tournaments and then out of nowhere the guy just literally missed 3, 4, 5, 6 times in a row. That just doesn't happen. It's just the blocks happen in good timing succession, right? It's the deflections that happen in really good timing succession. But how often in a really in like a tournament do you really see masters at the art just whiff? You know what I mean? It's like, it's not usually like that. It's not like they're just, I guess I'm just off today. It's much more about the opponent being good than you being bad. And I think we, again, I've said this before, we as DMs don't do enough to show the fact that a bad dice roll doesn't mean that you're a bad character. It just means that you're up against a really good opponent.
For sure.
Or vice versa, right? So, with that, I would absolutely, as an older style DM, I would look at it as, if you're going to sit there and say that on your off time, you took apart, you took this thing apart and you figured out more understanding about it, even though it wasn't any actual detriment, it was your dice roll that messed with you, I'm gonna give you some sort of bonus, because it's like, imagine if you had a pistol in real life. It's easy, something that, you know, for me that I can understand, right?
For sure.
I'm gonna go and I'm gonna try and shoot my pistol at the range, and I miss the target. I'm getting completely off. I try to mess with my sights. I'm just off, right? So what am I gonna do? When I'm off the range, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna try to dial in my sights. I'm gonna maybe take the gun apart. I'm gonna try to figure out if it's, clogged. I'm gonna make sure that it's working in good condition. Maybe I'll clean it. And then I go back to the range. Even if I didn't fix the problem of my aiming, did I get more familiar with my gun?
Very much so.
Is it gonna be in better working condition because I cleaned it?
Very much so.
And then maybe I learned something along the way. Maybe I learned why I wasn't able to zero it correctly. Maybe I was adjusting the rear sight in the incorrect order. So now when I aim, even though I don't have good aim, maybe I still hit the target this time, but I'm hitting the edges of the target because I learned by doing so how to correct it. Now, did I go home and fire the weapon? Do I have a magical range at my house? No. How does taking the weapon apart help me at the range if I don't physically fire it? It doesn't. But me understanding the weapon more, handling the weapon in my hands, just simply carrying it in my hands because I was messing with it, getting used to the weight. You know what I mean? Maybe I did a couple dry fires. Maybe the idea that if you have an artificer who just by its nature is rolling bad because of their dice, but then they want to in-game narratively figure out a way to improve it, why don't they just get better? It doesn't have to be a long-term, oh, now you get a +2 to everything.
Sure.
But you can say, at least for, a little while, that, okay, you're going to get a small boost because of X, Y, and Z, right? Like, I don't mind when you take people's efforts, right? And apply benefits to them. But I think this scares a lot of DMs because everything is so structured, because everything is so specific, and everything has been so weighed and balanced. And no, 5th edition is not balanced, but it's been attempted that people are afraid of breaking the game.
I feel like there are what I would consider, again, this feels aggressive to say, but red flag players. Some would call them toxic players that are going to try and, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And then just try and like automatically get random bonuses for stuff. Oh, just because I said I fixed something. Like, they want to try and like,
and that's that's the expectation. That's the min-maxing, and that's why it's never repeatable. That's why the whole point is, yes, just because he could do it, you could do it. So how long in game are you going to take? What steps are you going to do to learn it because you saw him do it? You don't just automatically get it. But again, I think this is what scares DMs, is because it is a lot. It's so much to keep track of. And it's not easy, right? This is why DMing used to take a long time, and now it's so much easier to just basically be a first-time DM and pick up the game, right? You have the modules, you have the settings, you have narratives that you can follow, and you have a shit ton of rules that everybody can easily just play on rails. But that doesn't have to be the point. You know what I mean? That doesn't have to be the end result. From the very beginning, it never had to be that way. It was, here's guidelines, have fun. And that's the problem. But everyone took it and was just like, it's too difficult, it's too complicated, I'm just gonna do this. And like Soul, like what you were saying, like I don't know if I would call that flavor, because you say it's all 100% flavor text, but the whole point is you said that you marked it down to use it for later. That means it's not flavor text. That means it's actually real, it's tangible. The thing I don't like about flavor text is when you add flavor text, but the flavor text does not change anything of the outcome. You know what I mean? That, like, pure and simple, when flavor text is there just to sound cool, but does not at all inflict anything on the game. Like, if you say, if you have the option, like, flavor text to me is, if in a game I say I use my movement to, close distance, and then I attack with my sword. That's one way to say it. But if you wanted to put flair and say that you're gonna, run up, like, kind of like slide on one knee and go after their legs, right? Even if you don't, if that's all you just say, some DMs would be like, okay, roll to hit. All right, you missed. So you slid up and you missed him, and now you're just in front of him. Flavor text. For me, even if you miss, you're now on your knees, and he's not going to get like maybe an opportunity attack, or maybe you're going to be able to get to do something because you did that. if you did something really flourishing, right? Like if during a rage, if a barbarian rages and then swings at an opponent, right? And if all he says is I rage and then I swing, okay, you rage and you swing. But if someone goes out of their way to be like, I run up to him mid rage, like I'm gonna be just, I'm gonna run up using my movement. I'm gonna mid run, I'm gonna rage at him, and I'm just gonna take my battle axe out and just, scream bloody murder and swing on him. Even if you miss, that's intimidating as fuck. I'm going to use that against that character now. That enemy, it just saw that happen, and now they're going to think twice about what's going on. But a flavor text would just be, oh, you missed. Okay, you missed. Yeah, it looks cool. Yeah, you ran up, you screamed at him, but you missed. Moving on. That's what I don't like, because that means that the narrative doesn't matter. That means that the player's input doesn't matter. Because when you do that, in my opinion, when you play that way, again, if you like it, that's fine. But when I am a player in that kind of a game, and I suddenly realize or slowly start to realize that my actual input doesn't change anything, I might as well be replaced with a dice roller. You know what I mean? If the game is so cookie cutter that I can't actually inflict anything based off of my role playing in this game from a tabletop, on the tabletop, like
tabletop RPG.
Like if my role playing has absolutely zero value, then all I am is a multiple choice dice roller. Because you're going to give me choice A, B, C, or D and ask me to choose, and then you're going to have me roll dice on it. You know what I mean? But that's all I am. If my actual role play doesn't matter, because I've played with DMs like this, right? I've played with DMs who treat players like everything they say is flavor text, but then they don't understand why players aren't getting into the narrative and the story. And it's like, but it's so enriching, and all, it's like, why didn't you like that king? He's so cool. And it's so enriching. It's like, yeah, but he doesn't respond to anything. I ask him a question and I try to be insulting, and you just answer the question. I try to be the question, and I try to be super respectful, and I just get an answer to the question. If me treating the king like an asshole, or me treating the king like he's God, literally gives me the same answer, then it doesn't fucking matter what I'm doing. Like, to me, that is not a role-playing game.
That's a lot of 4th edition mentality, because that is very video gaming. When you have
it's very video gaming
programmed, the NPCs are going to have a very select few responses. You've got to select things that you can choose, right? And they'll respond to those select things. But a lot of the times when you're a character and you're trying to be a character and you're trying to respond to this individual, if the DM is not of the same mind that these are actual characters that are going to respond to you as a person, as a being, right? You go up and like step on their foot, are they just going to look at you and be like, so where do you want to go next?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, I wanna.
It brings me back to this Discord group that I was gaming with for a while, where it was like, no matter what we did, it just felt like, rolling dice and just selecting, options. But the DM was so weird about what they would
be excited about.
Yes, right. Like some people would literally flavor text the crap out of something, even what they said had no bearing on the outcome, and they would get bonuses. But things that were done with the intent of altering it were just shrugged off. You know what I mean? It's like he literally like the DM would literally like encourage people to do things that literally didn't affect his decisions. So it's like if you could do anything and make it sound really cool, but it didn't affect what he wanted, he would praise you for it. But anything you did that would just throw a monkey wrench into it,
that would make him have to think or do something different or potentially create something up on the spot.
It's those little things, right? It's like I want my decisions to matter, and I want a game that's interactable, right? If you're just going to give me a story that I got to play by numbers, I got to just walk through the door and then fight these enemies, and then this guy's going to give me like just a bunch of storyline, and I could ask questions, but if the questions don't matter, like, again, it doesn't have to be open-ended. Not everybody can do an open world, but it's very difficult to get into a storyline when it doesn't matter what questions I answer, because you're going to lead, like, the story and the narrative is going to lead me regardless of what I know. If I don't pay attention and I don't know the artifact's name, right? I'm still going to get led to the artifact.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, not a lot of DMs know how to shut down a campaign if it's not done properly, right? Not a lot of DMs know how to derail a campaign, because of like, I know that there's a lot of DMs who are against the idea of even suggesting that a campaign cannot be won if the players don't do something. I know DMs that are against that. The idea that you could like
soft lock yourself out of something.
Yes. I know there's a big split on whether or not something like plot wise should ever be left up to a dice roll. I know that's a huge issue with a lot of DMs out there. There's a big division on whether or not any plot driven aspect should ever be locked behind a dice roll.
I'll say,
and I get
on
the
that
argument.
Point, my biggest thing is transparency. I'm okay with that happening if your players aren't like completely caught off guard by it. It's like, oh, I have no idea what's going on. I roll this dice. Yeah, by the way, you can't finish the campaign now. Sucks to suck. Like, to me, that I feel like it's hard. But again, if you're out here and you're like, yo, listen, if you do this, now, if you as players can find some creative way around it that actually makes sense that I didn't think of, by all means, unlock it. Right? But as far as what I had planned and what I know of what's happening, if you do this right here, you are cutting off your access to this aspect of what's going on in the world. If you're doing that and you fail because of whatever dice roll, you don't convince them or whatever the case may be, or you get like a really bad roll and they just hate you for whatever reason, it happened.
Yeah.
You were aware of it. You knew what was going on. And like, that's what
I also get it from consequences. I get it from the mindset of a linear DM who like if your game is, if your campaign is very linear, there's a start and there's an end and there's a clear path to get there. I get it from that point of view of not wanting anything that could derail that linear process to be up to chance. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Having a puzzle that they can't pass.
Yeah, I do see that.
Having, an NPC that they're not supposed to kill or they're supposed to help survive. Those are things that make sense. I get it from the argument that, oh, you're in a room and the only way through is if you successfully, find this hidden door. And if you roll badly and no one finds it, tough. There's no other way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I get those arguments. I totally do. Especially when, again, it's a very structured, locked in linear campaign. But while I understand that argument, my solution to that, if you aren't interested in an open world campaign, is be willing to be creative and flexible instead of being linear, right? Allow yourself, if you see them about to, instead of just not allowing locks, like soft locks, find a time where you see that there's a chance for a soft lock and be like, okay, well, we'll call this one the easy version and I'll create a new harder version if this doesn't work out.
Yeah.
As in, oh, you found that secret door? Well, that's the easy version, right? But maybe the hard version is you come back to town and then you get a clue and then you have to go around and find the original secret entrance.
You do some other stuff. It might take you a little bit longer. You might be a little bit lower on
maybe
resources.
there's just a new NPC you have to go get who he'll know where the secret entrance is, right? Like, these are the things for me where I'm always more about solutions than I am about problems.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the ideas of this, well, that can't be because that causes too many problems. It's like, but you're not looking for a solution, right? The idea that it shouldn't be locked behind a dice roll. And it's like, why is it locked in the first place? And why can't there be another option? And this is just
that to
one
me,
way through.
I don't feel like there's any module that sets stuff up like that. I feel like it's really to the DM and whatever game you're creating. Like, if you don't want that to happen in your game, don't build that into your game. Don't build a game where there's only one way through a door. Like,
Exactly.
And like a lot
and
of
if there
times,
is, again, like you said, be transparent. Like in High Point,
yeah,
y'all know by the point that you got to that door, there would have been plenty of, this is it
warning
moments.
signs. Yeah,
It would have, you guys would know what you're doing, right? I'm not just going to throw you into a place and be like, there's one door. Oh, well, you can't get through it. Oh,
jammed your key in the lock.
Game's over, guys. Everyone go home. No, you guys would know, like, up to this point, like, this is it. Like, it would have been a big deal. You would have had the knowledge. So, yeah, my biggest thing is, like, find your way of solving it instead of just saying that well, there's only one way to do it, and that's it.
You
So
better figure it
therefore-
out.
Yeah, or making it so obvious to figure out, because I don't want it to be a puzzle. I want it to be a linear, you guys just get it and move on, right? Because
Yeah.
again, it's very interesting for DMs who want to, like, a TPK, but it's like it's pretty easy to do a TPK when you control how much your players can actually do.
Yeah.
All right. Well, apparently everybody really wants to get onto the history of Dragonborn. Apparently, we're getting bitched at in chat
Oh no.
for having a tangent. Oh no,
Listen,
that's never heard of. We had a tangent, man.
what we do, my guys. This is what we do. This is what y'all are here for. Lightweight. But fair enough. We got a title for a reason, so I'm here for it.
Yeah, but it was important to go over that. I highly
No, that
suggest y'all take a look at that video. It's about as long as this tangent was, so if you listen to this tangent, you can watch the video. But it goes into a lot more better detail. But okay, so y'all want to know the history of Dragonborn, do ya? Well, let's go. It's not gonna be that long of an episode, so it's probably good that we had a nice little tangent. Do we get the story of the Dragonborn from Skyrim? No, we do not get that one. This is going to be the D&D Dragonborn.
Ooh.
So as you all may have remembered from last week when we did the history of dragons, the Dragonborn were actually only hinted at early on, actually like midway through, and weren't really solidified until much later. So we didn't have anything related to the Dragonborn in first edition. Wasn't even an idea. We know that from last week, the dragons were basically just animalistic creatures, fierce, but mainly used for XP and treasure.
Mm-hmm.
Second edition, we did get close. We did get draconic humanoids due to some magic that the dragons had. We also got the concept
full-blood dragons.
Yeah, these were still just dragons, like a polymorph.
Got it.
We had half dragons, which were suggested of different species mingling with dragons, but not necessarily humans. They were meant.
What edition did those guys get introduced? Was that third?
That was second edition.
That was second edition.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was just the idea of being able to create like a dragon horse, or like creatures being mixed with dragons. And then we had the Council of Worms campaign, which allowed you to become a dragon in second edition, but this is still full-blown dragons. Dragonborn as a race and as a humanoid concept, still not there.
Okay.
In third edition is where we get one of the very first absolute glimpses. It was actually we talked about this last week, where third edition core rule set introduced the dragon lineages, like the ancestries, so bloodlines.
Yeah.
More for lore purposes, more for connecting you to dragons, maybe give you a special power here or there. But that was about it. That was the closest thing we got until Races of the Dragon came out. That was a supplemental book. And this was the first.
Races of the Dragon? That's what the book was called?
Races of the Dragon.
Okay.
And this was the 3.5 supplemental. And this is where we first get Dragonborn. Like, this is where the first mention of Dragonborn is, as well as it being somewhat of a playable race. And this book distinguished it differently from the half dragons that we got in second edition.
Okay.
So this was more the closest thing we get to a non-dragon, non-half dragon. Like, it was its own distinct type of race. But typically at first it was described as individuals who underwent ritual transformations, dedicating themselves to one of the two gods, the two dragon gods.
Interesting.
And in true older fashion, instead of this just being like something you start out with, it was an actual process that erased your entire previous racial identity. So you basically weren't like the Dragonborn we think of. It was almost like a prestige class. You basically transformed into you were reborn into a dragon.
So it almost feels like becoming a vampire or a werewolf or something like that, where it's like you are becoming a new creation. Like, if you had these other your racial stats are now this. Now, depending on how you play vampires, they can merge and you can get both, but still. Okay.
So this was a whole new thing. You had the ancestral link, so usually it had some sort of lore tied to your bloodline, kind of, bringing the idea of why you could even do this. But based on those links would be depending on what kind of dragon you'd be able to turn into, like what house or whatever type you would have in. You did get your breath weapons, which were, minimized versions of the main breath weapon. when you made your transformation, you still maintained as humanoid, but you did get scales, horns, claws, and other draconic features.
Okay.
So this is the first time we get this mishmash before we get what we think of Dragonborn, which is more akin to a lizard folk with dragon features.
Sure.
This is exactly what you think of originally, which is like a dragon in human form. Because I personally don't. I'm not a huge fan of Dragonborn in the 5th edition mindset in terms of looks.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like lizard folk with some dragon tendencies.
Right.
But this description of you were just a humanoid with scales, claws, like full on just a dragon with hands and feet instead of a big ass body and wings. Like it feels
like how we saw that the hippo.
Yes, exactly. Right. Better proportioned. Just I feel like this was better to me in terms of like a description.
Okay.
And then you could this was actually kind of interesting because they had 3 aspects that helped for customization. So you actually got to choose one of these 3 things. You either got to choose heart, which is your breath weapon, mind, which was resistance is a knowledge, or wings, which gave you limited flight ability.
That's kind of cool.
So you didn't just get all of these features. As when you transitioned and made the transformation, you had to choose which one of the aspects you wanted. And that gave you a little bit, so you could fly, you could have your breath weapon, or you could get your magical
almost
resistances.
Kind of like how they do subclasses a little bit.
Exactly.
Or not subclasses, sub races. Okay, very cool.
But this was the first time we got a playable race called the Dragonborn, and it was the first humanoid dragon that we got in the supplemental. So yeah, I think that 3.5 really nailed it with this idea of bringing the dragon lineages one step closer. You were able to play a dragon, you were able to be a lineage of a dragon. Why not go that one step further and become a humanoid type dragon? So I really like that. But surprisingly enough, we got more not yet. Just I have more information on the draconic aspect. So heart being the draconic breath weapon. If you chose this, you gained a breath weapon based on the dragon type that you were a lineage of. You got acid, cold, fire, or lightning. You had a 30-foot line or a 15-foot cone,
okay,
depending on which one you chose. And the damage would scale with the character level. So I do appreciate that as you leveled up, the better it got. If you chose mind, draconic senses, you gain bonuses to perception. You also got low light vision and blind sense. And then you got enhanced ability to detect magic.
Interesting.
And I think at higher levels, you got resistances to the type. Like if you were, red, you got resistance to fire at later levels.
Sure.
And then if you chose wings, you would gain glide, and at higher levels, full on flight for temporary distances.
Oh, very cool.
And then not too much abilities in combat, but definitely made travel, exploration, scouting.
Right.
So 4th edition, that's where I was going to go next. So with 4th edition, this is where Dragonborn became core. This is where we got Dragonborn officially out of a supplemental and became a core rulebook, and just a baseline race that we're all familiar with. So this one, they kept it with the ancient heritages. So this one is the idea that Dragonborn, these kind are descendants. So instead of a transformation, you can just start out as a descendant of some sort of kind of like how they would how they used to talk about it, where it was like some usually great hero, just you're kind of a descendant line. That's why your blood's so strong, and then it can come out in various ways.
Fair enough.
And then with the abilities didn't change a whole lot. You got your elemental resistances and a breath weapon together. So this was a full on, you became that. You got a resistance and you got a breath weapon.
Okay.
It also scaled with level, so it would get stronger with you, which is always great. And you would get with this race, you would usually get a boost to strength or charisma when you chose the race. So it had an initial strength and charisma.
I was always curious why, because even in 5th edition, one of the main Dragonborn stat bumps is charisma. Why is charisma something that is generally tied to them?
Mainly what I've always looked at that as their societal prestige. You know what I mean? They look tough. So when it's kind of like the idea of, seeing a bunch of knights in armor just kind of show up. It's there's an air of majesty to them, right? The cavalry rides by and there's just a sense of respect. There's charismatic, right? Like you could see a ruffian, you could see a rogue, you could see just, a bar fighter and be intimidated by him. But you see a soldier, a veteran, knight walk into a bar and you just have this charismatic aspect, right? They could say something and you're just, you get that inspiringness about them. That's how I've always looked at why they do charisma with the Dragonborn, is they are the descendants, right? They're the closest thing humanoid to us of the descendants of one of the, traditionally in lore, the greatest races.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of their charisma is just, I think, almost a societal knock-on effect of just, you just have that air of confidence and that when you speak, people want to listen. You're unique, you're connected to one of the most powerful races, and typically you just come with a kind of that booming voice, I would think, right? Like just, you make a presence. So I kind of like that. I kind of like the idea that it makes sense that the race itself just is instinctually calls people's attention, right? You're not disgusted by them. You're not afraid of them. There's something about them that draws attention and respect. So that's kind of how I've always interpreted it.
Interesting.
Because with charisma, it's kind of hard, right? It's not really a built-in thing that you could be, like charisma is a societal connection.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm thinking, like, when you think about dragons, people might be afraid of you, but it's like, it's that majesticness, right? It's that look of...
I definitely view charisma as, not only just how well you could interact with somebody, like the idea of, if you've ever heard the terminology of pretty privilege, people who are just innately beautiful, they get better reactions from people because people see them X, Y, and Z.
They don't have to be well spoken,
like,
but if they look good enough, it's good. Yeah,
sure. And so like a lot of it can come from just pure notoriety that could increase your charismatic levels. And it might not be like, you could be like terrible with your words. You could be like really bad at doing what you do, but still have a decent opportunity to help influence these certain charismatic situations. Like when you think about what actually you get from having high charisma, the ability to deceive, the ability to persuade, the ability to perform, like all of those things, they come in handy when it comes to having higher charisma. So
it reminds me of Balin the Fisherman from Epic NPC, man, the YouTube shorts.
I don't know if I've seen
Great day for fishing, ain't it?
Oh, that guy.
Like,
yes.
So Balin is a perfect example of an NPC with stupid high charisma, right? He's not the most intelligent character. He doesn't have to say a lot, but guess what? Nobody really dislikes him, and he just has he just says that, and you're just like, it is a nice day for fishing, ain't it?
Everybody vibes.
Like, you know what I mean? Like that. That's what we mean.
Attitude.
That's what we mean by charisma, and that's what I imagine. Like with the Dragonborn, is it's just when you see them, it's just that regalness, right? You see the dragon in them physically, and you just can't help but have a respect for that, right? It's kind of like, instead of having resting bitch face, you have that like resting regal face. You just always look like you're just pondering the greatness of the universe whenever you're just sitting there zoning out, right? And that can be charismatic, right? The idea that, again, walk around in plate armor, even if you're not a knight, and people are gonna like get out of your way. People are gonna like maybe want to buy you a drink. It's kind of like, stolen valor concept. There's just something about society that just likes Dragonborn. They're just fascinated. And when you speak, people listen. I don't think that has to do with the individual. That can literally come, like what you said, just come from your notoriety. And your notoriety doesn't have to be personal. It could be the family. It could be, again, it could just be your race. Why, it's the opposite coin of why a lot of DMs stereotypically make orcs and half orcs not liked in villages. Like if you play a kobold or a goblin or a half orc in a lot of campaigns, I know a lot of DMs who would make your time in civilized areas hard because people don't like, they would bring in the racism thing usually for orcs. It's almost like the opposite of that. It's positive racism. If you think about it, you could say
fair enough.
the reason Dragonborn have high charisma is positive racism. Because you're a Dragonborn, you're just assumed to be regal. You're assumed to be astute. You're assumed to have knowledge of the ages, and you're just some dude who has dragon lineage. You're not anything special, but everyone assumes you are. So again, good or bad, it doesn't matter, right? But you could say that there's a subtleness to why charisma is given to certain creatures.
Interesting. Very interesting.
I mean, it's like it would be like if you made trolls a playable race and you gave trolls automatic proficiency in intimidation. Even if they are this most docile, friendly, geeky troll build, the point is everyone expects a troll to be bloodthirsty and scary.
See, that goes back to my personal argument that I believe there's something to be said for using different stats for the same role. I think a role like that specifically would use a character's strength, not their charisma. Like when it comes to if you're being intimidating.
But I'm not saying specifically for charisma itself. I'm just saying that you could play a character who is not intimidating, right? Your build could not be intimidating, but because you chose the troll race, I'm gonna give you the proficiency in intimidation.
Right.
It has nothing to do with your stats. It's just that
I see what you're saying.
It's the revert. I'm just saying
you could be like a nice mousy, like I'm gonna sew your clothes troll, but you're
everyone's reaction
intimidating.
And even if you never use it, even if you're like, but I don't want to use intimidation, it's like, but you're a troll, so you just have.
I feel like they should have passive intimidation,
or that, or they have advantage.
Go around scaring people, like almost unintentionally.
Can you imagine how if you imagine like a funny trait where, if you're the troll, right? Anytime you make here would be a great way to do this. As this race, you have advantage on intimidation checks. However, whenever you try to make a persuasion check, roll or do a 50-50, and you have a 50-50 chance of accidentally doing an intimidation check, and then because you have an advantage, so imagine that you don't want to play an intimidating character, but whenever you try to persuade someone, you have to roll to see if you accidentally intimidate them, and then you have advantage on that roll.
That's wild.
Can you imagine that kind of a flaw in a character to be like, but I'm just trying to be nice?
That would be very interesting. Like the kindest, most gentlest creature, yet they're just stupid scary.
Right?
There's this
that could be so funny.
A group of people that play D&D, and there's this character named Torbeck. And Torbeck kind of talks like this all the time, and Torbeck uses his own name and so he's like talking to these people, and he's got this very like aggressive, and he's like this big burly looking dude. And there was this one point in time, I forget where they were or what they were doing, but somebody was like, Torbeck, what do you sound like to yourself? And the DM was like, you find that you have the ability to articulate what you think you sound like to yourself. And Torbeck sounds like this to himself.
Very eloquent.
Like, that's what he hears himself as, but everybody else hears him as this just like rough. So I make him like,
and I like that. I like that. You know what I mean? And that's what I mean is like, I these are the kind of fun things because, again, part of that video I was talking about earlier is, stats don't have to mean what you think it means. Like the argument for intelligence, right? There is a colloquial understanding that if you have a low intelligence score, like it was your dump stat, you're going to play a stupid character. But there is a large portion of the gaming community who looks at intelligence as a stat and goes, intelligence controls things like how many spells you can have, how many languages you know. And, but it does not tell it. There is nowhere in the core book that says intelligence means you're dumb. The only thing it can do is really control your language. Yes, we say that if you don't have a 3, you can't speak. But mute people can be smart. Like the reality is there is no core rule book, or there's no core rule that says intelligence means
so
the character's direct understanding.
I don't know about in earlier editions, but in 5th edition at least, there is something to be said for certain spells that are supposed to affect your mind can't affect creatures with an intelligence of 4 or lower. Right?
That's fine.
So, and I don't know if that is it equates to the fact that they can't, their brain is not complex enough to be
But that's the
affected
thing.
in that way.
But that's it. But this is the beauty of it, right? There's nothing in the rule book. All it says is there's a limitation, and all intelligence controls is things like languages. But there's no connection that specifically states that you can't put on your own pants at 1 intelligence. We colloquially came up with that idea, right? And that's the fascinating aspect, is when you say things like charisma, I love creating this idea, right? I love creating this narrative of why Dragonborn have charisma, right? I would love to make that for High Point of just, this is why. Like, it's just a colloquial thing of Dragonborn, just, again, reverse, positive racism, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, charisma has technically nothing to do with how well you look or how well you speak. It only affects certain spells and certain dice rolls, but it does not anywhere explicitly state charisma is your articulation. Charisma is your way with words. Charisma is your attractiveness. But we have grown to have this experience of a role-playing game where we don't want to just say, well, I'm the best looking, the best speaking. Like, there's a large group of players who got to a point where they were like, I want to play a character that's not me. So I'm going to say that he has a low intelligence, so I want to play low intelligence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there are so many, again, there's a group of players who are like, it doesn't matter what character I play, it's me, my mind playing the game. But it's like, but how is that fun? After a while, it's like, again, where's the role play?
Mm-hmm.
But that's that weird duality, is there are some people who the role play is about the choices you make, not the things you say. And there's the other people who are like, well, the game's about the choices I make, but how I make them is the role play.
Right.
And that's where it's fascinating is, again, it's just, I love that. I love thinking, well, why does it make sense? But other people are like, it doesn't matter because it only affects XYZ.
Got you.
And I, it's really interesting when you try to, again, that video was so cool just to really understand. It makes me look at every edition and just the general community way different.
Right.
Now that I've really understand the arguments that have been happening for 50 fucking years.
Yep.
At this point, I'm just like, none of us are right. None of us are wrong. D&D is a game. Go play it. Go have fun. Like, I am
100%,
I am
exactly.
more and more locked in on this idea that, like, honestly, the more we've been doing this over the last 2 years, I have never swayed on my ideas with High Point. I have never given up on High Point. I've never even come close. But the longer we do this, the more we talk about 5th edition, the more we get involved with the community. I will say that there's part of me that have questioned my dedication to 2nd edition and just the reality of what that means for the future, how hard it's going to be, go on and so forth. Like, when we get to D&D 7, what am I going to be doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's just been times where I'm just like, why? What's the point? Like there's just a lot of like questions that I've been having over the last 2 years about the future of High Point and its purpose and what I'm doing. And it's funny because it's like, as much as most of it doesn't matter because I have my own reasons for High Point and my stories and just why I like it. It was funny watching that video completely like just got rid of all of those questions because of the mindset that it just made me realize that it's my story. And it's all that matters is that the players that I play with enjoy my story. And it doesn't matter if I use 5th edition rules because I'm not here to make someone who has played in your realm. I don't want them to come over and have expectations. I don't want people who have read every 5th edition book and are like, I know the exact character I want, and here's every ability I'm going to use in this exact order. I don't want that. And if you come to High Point with that, you're not going to have a good time either. And at the end of the day, I don't need to be up to date in order to create a world that people enjoy listening to and people enjoy, you know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, it's like, I don't know what I was kind of worried about, because it's like, it's not going to be any less interesting. If we play my, High Point on stream, it's not going to be any less interesting. People may not know the rules as readily, but how often are you watching a 5th edition live stream and you know every single rule? Like, after a while, even they're looking up the rules half the time. So it's like,
that happens a lot.
Like, what does it matter that I say it's 2nd edition when in reality it's so beyond? I mean, I say it's second edition, but that's only because that's where we basically start. Like you start
Right.
with the foundation of second edition character creation, but beyond that, it's just the story. So again, I know I keep pushing that video, but it's like, it is just amazing that it's not only opened my mind up to the greater community and just D&D as a general, but it's also just kind of re-solidified like my place in D&D and like why I'm happy with High Point and where I'm at with everything. I intimidate the carriage so it repairs itself. That would be fucking hilarious.
Hell yes.
They're like called Pissed Carpenter.
Well,
yeah, charisma could be like how easy you get attention from others. I mean, yeah, like it's so great to realize like, yeah, it doesn't matter how you define them as long as everybody at the table knows that that's the definition you're using for that game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's it's consistency. What we always say.
Consistency is key.
All right, so back to Dragonborn. Where were we? Dragon lineages, the natural strengths. Oh yeah, we talked about the natural strength and charisma. So in 4th edition, we had more specific dragon types. So we had the fire dragonborn, which obviously we had a fire breath weapon, fire resistance. We have cold, lightning, acid, and poison. All of them got their own resistance as well as their own breath weapon. And they also got increased. What 4th edition had was healing surges, kind of like being able to spend your hit die to get life back during combat. So certain draconic carriages came with extra healing surges, and of course your strength and charisma bonus. So that's really what 4th edition gave us as a core rule set. And then of course we get to 5th edition, at least 5e14 for now. We'll figure out what they do in 5e24. I don't know if we have seen Dragonborns yet in 5e24.
Always look.
Or any major with dragons. So Dragonborn still remained core. Obviously, that's what everyone kind of knows it as. We got the refined mechanics, and they also kind of refined a little bit more about what they look like, where they come from, just, shaped it up, brought it back into the greater D&D at large. We kept the draconic bloodline, so instead of ancestry, they've solidified it, or at least come down on bloodlines. More tied specifically to dragon types, and it also opened it up. 4th edition was very specific on like where the dragon types came from. At 5th edition, basically just said, look, just whatever reason you want to be of dragon lineage, just you can decide, right? So that you don't have to be of a certain type or of a certain strength. You could just say that it was an experiment, or that ancient wizard did some like ritual, or you're just a dragonborn just because somewhere in your dragon lineage or your family lineage there was dragons, right? Like,
I mean,
basically kind of your own storyline.
There's literally a sorceress subclass that is the dragon. Is it dragon touched or something like that?
Yeah. So 5th edition basically just said make up your own reason why you're a dragonborn,
right?
Instead of it being like structured, which I don't mind that. Types and abilities, of course, that you each got your each dragonborn gets their own breath weapon, as well as their own resistances. So that kind of stayed the same. We did get stat bonuses to strength and charisma again, but I guess Tasha's Cauldron of Everything gave a few more customizations to those stats. So it gave different options on the types of dragons you were, and which bonuses you may have gotten outside of strength and charisma if you wanted to, I think, diversify. It's not going to help you if you wanted to be, a Dragonborn wizard.
Yeah, fair enough.
And then you got sub races. They were also introduced in Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. You got Draconic Gifts, basically helped expand Dragonborn, and even introduced Gem Dragon ancestries.
Oh, okay.
So we just kept getting more and more options.
I remember we had all those different types of dragons that were introduced later, Gem Dragons, Shadow Dragons, and stuff like that.
So with 5th edition, instead of 4th edition, it came as the fire, cold, lightning, acid, poison. Now what we have is Black Dragonborn with acid, breath weapon, and resistance. You have Blue Dragon with lightning, weapon, and resistance. Brass Dragonborn with fire, Bronze with lightning, Copper with acid, Gold with fire, Green with poison, Red with fire, Silver with cold, and White with cold. And then Fizban gave us the Gem Dragons, which were Amethyst, amethyst, crystal, emerald, sapphire, and topaz. Each one corresponded to their, I think we went over the other dragon with their individual breath weapons in the previous episode. And gem dragons got psionic abilities, things like telekinetic powers and flight.
Ooh, very cool.
So
very
not
cool.
psionics the way that we know them from second edition, but telepathic, psionic level abilities, psychic abilities.
Gotcha. I will say when we were building Shazam, I know that we looked at Dragonborn, specifically 2024 Dragonborn, because of the specific flight ability that they received in 2024, and that's how we got him his flight.
Yes, because right after like an attack or whatever, you were able to like gain flight.
Yeah,
right.
There was like a fly speed you would gain. So,
and then we also got the Drakenblood, which was the Explorer's Guide to Wildmount.
Okay.
This was another sub race, kind of like the Gem Dragons. This one was given a bonus to intelligence and charisma instead of strength.
Okay.
And they got advantage on social skill checks. So I'm assuming that means things like persuasion and whatnot.
I would assume that's anything charisma based, potentially not performance, because I don't know.
Like anything interactive that you're interacting with another person. And then we also got the Revenite as well. This was a bonus to strength and constitution. And you got something called Vengeful Assault, which you were able to make an attack as a reaction when struck.
Oh, that's wild.
So basically, it gives opportunity attack as a reaction attack.
From being attacked. Interesting.
Yeah, so that was kind of cool there. And that's where we are. I don't know what we have for 5e24, but that's basically it. We only got hints of the concept of Dragonborn as early as second edition. Third edition tried to give us the first idea of the first play set, but it wasn't really until fourth. Finally, for the first time ever, fourth edition actually did something good and gave us something good, which was a core Dragonborn race.
Cool beans.
But yeah, otherwise, not as robust as the history of dragons. The lore is not nearly as well put together, right? Again, it started with just dragon ancestry, dragon bloodline. It was more just kind of lofty. Fourth edition was very, very strict. There were very certain dragons you could be of lineage of, and that kind of dictated everything. So it really wasn't about your build as it was just a choice, kind of, just part of the min-maxing choice.
Sure.
Before that, it was purely just for lore purposes. And now fifth edition, it's kind of like, yeah, it has benefits. It's not just for lore purposes, but it doesn't really matter. You choose how you got it. So it's almost like they never really needed to make hard and fast rules. Like, again, we saw with the history of dragon, like those have just always been around, right? But it's almost like at some point they were just like, this idea, like, we played dragons, but how cool would it be to, like, everything else is humanoid? Why not? And that's kind of where they went with it, but they didn't really expand and be like, Dragonborn are like what we found with dragons. They're not integral to the entirety of D&D. They're just another thing you can play.
Yeah.
They're kind of in one respect. It's so funny. In one respect, they're nothing special. Like elves are more special because they're more integrated into the entirety of D&D than Dragonborn are. But Dragonborn are supposed to be the quintessential humanoids because they have the closest relation to the greatest, creatures. So I just find that interesting that the second greatest creatures to exist are kind of meh. They're mid. They're just mid.
Wild.
But that was it, everybody. Like I said, it was going to be pretty slow or pretty low. That history was not very robust. There's just not a lot to talk about.
We started
really.
kind of late. Again, like you said, we didn't get like AD&D. We didn't get first edition. Like we didn't get a lot of the older editions. Where, again, I feel like a lot of that is where you get a little bit more meat and potatoes, because like you were talking about, it wasn't a game yet. It was just an introduction, an idea. So there was a lot more to run with from that perspective. It was a lot more open from that perspective. And again, a lot of this stuff kind of narrows it down. Oh, this is specifically what it is and whatnot. So, and I guess that kind of makes sense specifically for Dragonborn. They were introduced later because it's just more specificity on what dragons were. And so then they kind of got a branch into their own aspect of what it means to be a dragon but also not, you know.
Mhm.
So and I think they did that with a lot of other things. Like if like the history of Blizzard folk, right? You're not gonna see that far back. Like maybe we'll get some in third edition, maybe in fourth edition, but you know, I would say that's a relatively new thing because you're just expanding what's out there, what exists, you know, the Herringon, the Loxodon, the all the other anthropomorphized thing. Like they're all coming into fruition. And like we're seeing from Marty the Fearless, they're including a whole lot of other things, bug creatures, um uh, lizard, other types of
Oh
lizard
yeah,
or reptile
reptilian,
creatures, you
insectoid.
know,
Yeah,
like
just
all
really
this kind of
expanding it.
stuff is just adding to what is out there and like giving you other options. So you know, it makes a lot of sense that they're going to see it out here, but I do think this was a great extension of what, like, going from dragons to, because there definitely was a lot more than you're gonna cover in just the whole entire history of dragons. You're
Oh
gonna go
yeah.
through all of this with that. So
By the way, I'm also I have it in the Discord if anybody is interested and wants to join Discord for that video. But for anybody who's watching the VOD or if you are just on Twitch right now, I'm going to post the link in chat for the video we've been talking about. So if
okay,
you want to go see
yeah,
that video, I'm just now following this person. I haven't seen them before. They just kind of popped up on my YouTube feed, but I'm probably going to start following them. But yeah, it
sweet.
was a really good. It is 50 minutes. It takes about maybe a
I
good
definitely thought you
solid.
said 15 minutes
Oh no, it's
earlier.
5-0.
5-0. Okay, gotcha.
It takes a good maybe 15 minutes to really feel like we're getting into the like the actual point of the video. So
Mhm.
I will say the first 15 minutes or so is kind of just a little bit dry. If you watch it 2 times speed, it goes by quick. But
For sure.
you know, I would say that yeah, really after that, just I would highly suggest listening to the whole thing if you're really interested in D&D history, not like what we do, the history of, but if you're interested in just like the history of D&D culture, the D&D community, and the rule sets. If you really want to understand like why things were the way they were or how they got now out of game, it's such a good episode because again, it's just some dude like us just talking to a camera, but it's so funny how well spoken he is because it's unedited. Like there's no cuts, there's no clips. It's just he's very well on topic. He says his points extremely well. I don't know if he has a script or if he's just well organized. But again, he goes through, he reads the actual the actual articles, the actual submissions
Mhm.
in full too, not just taking like 2 sentences. Like he actually reads out what people wrote into these magazines and makes a lot of really good points. Not everything I agree with.
Sure.
He and I definitely have different approaches to D&D. We're definitely on some different sides of the fence when it comes to some of those specific rule books or the specific rulings. But it's some of the things that he says, things about like his opinion on homebrew. You know, it totally makes sense why I used to have such an issue with that because homebrew to me was D&D. Like before homebrew was a thing, like D&D was all about, again, you had to make it work. That's the whole point.
Yep.
There's the whole video he goes about is just how to make D&D work with the tiny rule sets that you had. And then I started, you know, getting introduced to people who thought homebrew was a bad thing. They were like, oh, that's not real D&D. And it's like, but it is. It's literally D&D, but
Yep.
again, this was that transition from old school game to this new era where all of the rules are there. But if you grew up with D&D in the older versions, there weren't enough rules to say that this is the entire game, right? So it's fascinating that it's so fascinating to just see how prevalent the arguments you see today in comment sections have been literally the same arguments for the last 50 years. We may be arguing about subclasses, but the reason we're arguing about those rules are the same arguments people had before. Just again, it's just a different rule set, but it's the same argument. You know, the same reason why some people, you know, say you don't know how to play the game or you're not playing right. It's
Yeah.
everybody, they've been saying that for years. And it's just because that's the nature of the game. The game was never a game. It was a series of ideas to tell a story and have fun. And then it became what, you know, it's just, yeah, it's so cool. Like I said, I'm going to see D&D so differently And it's weird to say it, but I have such a bigger appreciation for High Point and for everything that I've done with it.
I'm
Like,
glad.
it's
Truly.
it's like my own creation. Of course I love it, but again, just having a bigger appreciation for D&D as a game and D&D as a community, and seeing the 50 years, and just even thinking about that, just thinking about how long I've been
50
playing
years,
D&D and just being part of something that's been 50 years strong and only growing because of the community, right? It's not growing because of some greedy company. It's not growing because Gygax became a billionaire and his family is just bleeding it dry.
Mm-hmm.
The community, like, yes, Wizards of the Coast may have made some bad decisions. TOS may have made some bad decisions, but at the end of the day, like, D&D has always been kept alive because of the of its audience, because of its player base, because of the community. And 5th edition just like did it right by opening the floodgates. Like, if it wasn't for 5th edition, we wouldn't have the popularity. Remember, like, people I think take for granted, anybody who played.
Do you know what year 5th edition's first released?
2014.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
2014.
So but the funny part is like, I think people who play 5th edition, again, even the people who are that I say that are like, entitled, and the min-maxers, like everybody who started with 5th edition, I don't want to say everybody, but there's a good, I would say the majority of people who started with 5th edition as their D&D camp, as their D&D like landscape. I think they take for granted the struggle D&D had before 5. Like, you guys got, think about this, like thinking about before AD&D, before it was really a game, people were talking to each other about this game across, the nation via magazines. There were people who for months, for years, would be playing this game and having no idea if they were playing it correctly. Having no idea that you played this game absolutely differently until those magazines came out, right? And this was just because of, pre-internet era, but then as things progressed, like, D&D wasn't in every, gaming shop, right? You had to go, like, it was deep, right? You had to go to, like, the really, like, hardcore gaming shops to find shit like that, right?
Right.
And it's just, it fascinates me that D&D was only kept alive before 2nd edition and before 3rd edition, it was kept alive because of a group of friends. I mean, D&D only exists because of a group of friends, and it stayed alive because of a group of friends. And then a bunch of random ass people found it and were like, hey, this is cool. Let's keep it alive long enough. And then finally it blew up. Finally, it became what you would finally say it became popular. And now, unlike other games that are just being bled dry, it's only expanding to accommodate the new player base. And that's one of the beautiful things I love about D&D is it just keeps getting bigger because of the community. It changes with the community and because of the community, not in spite of the community.
Right.
You know what I mean? And there's not a lot of other games that are doing that really, either some games stick too stubbornly to the originals and they're just like, no, we will never change. And then there are other games who are trying too hard to keep up. D&D is just that nice little middle where it's like, look, we have some good lore, we have some good hardcore mechanics, but we hear you. We hear the pain points, we hear the stress, and we want everybody to be able to enjoy this game as cleanly as possible. Now, that may not be the way I like to play. I don't necessarily want to run the same exact game you run. And I don't necessarily want your player to leave your game and come over to my game and have 99% understanding and expectations met, right? I don't necessarily want that personally because that's not how I started, and I found it really fun to go to a different DM and figure out how they played and play a new game. But I get that that's what the majority wants, and that's what the game's doing. It's giving the player base what the majority does want. But that's where I start to question, is it truly the majority or is it the vocal minority that's making that change? And that's where I think 2024 is really going to be interesting because a lot of people have a lot of positives about it. But is it really the choices that everybody wanted, or is it just a few people got what they finally really want? You know what I mean?
I definitely feel like there's a lot of both. Like, I have a lot of the videos that I've seen of people just reviewing like tiny little elements of it. I feel like there are so many mixed signals. They're like, oh my gosh, rangers finally get this as a class feature instead of a spell, but then there's like, oh my gosh, wizards, that's what you got? Like,
Right.
what is happening here? So it's like, and again, this is why I like what, I'm not gonna say what D&D is. What I receive from D&D, what I take from D&D is that it is a melting pot of options for you to choose from. And so it's like, okay, if I like that aspect of what you did with Monk, then guess what? I'm gonna take that. But if I don't like that aspect, guess what? You know what I mean? And I'm gonna keep doing that with all the things. I'll be like, oh yes, that's exactly. I love it working like that. I've had my own getaway of doing it from this point forward, but now I can use this because this particular way works better. Or that was a nice change, but I still like the way that I've been doing it better than that, right? Like if they have a new crit rule, like that might be cool, but I still might like the way I do it better.
Hoilepa has a great way of putting it. D&D is a frame with a blank picture. And I like this for a couple different reasons, not just because of the idea of the blank canvas that you paint, right? But I like this analogy more because this is that dichotomy, right? There's some people on one side who view D&D, and why they like 5th edition is they view D&D like a paint by numbers book, and that's what they want, right?
Mm-hmm.
They want to be able to pick the picture that they're painting. They want to be able to choose the colors that they're painting with, but they still want a clear guide of what the picture is and how it should be structured,
create it.
Right? Like, just tell me what colors should go where. I will choose what colors they are, but let me know once I've chosen a color, this is where all of that color needs to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
They want the structure, they want the big picture, but they want the flavor, right? They didn't want to create the lion. They just wanted to choose the lion to be purple and not orange, right?
Sure.
The flavor of the lion, but everything else is there, right? They didn't have the ability to craft the lion, know where the colors needed to match, but they still wanted the creative freedom, right? That's I think either the vocal minority or that is the majority of the community right now. And that's what 5th edition is. 5th edition is a paint by numbers coloring book. Nothing wrong with it. It's your freedom to make the image look how you want. Technically, you can draw outside the lines if you want. It may not look great if you do that, but you can, right?
And everything is there for you to...
Right. So, but there is a structure there that you can't get out of, which is why it may not look pretty. You can't change the base structure. Even so, if you paint outside the lines, it may look a little bit weird, but otherwise, or, you don't have to make all the ones the same color, but if you don't, it's, again, not going to look right. And that's fine. Like, that's totally fine. That is 5th edition, and I think that is either what the vocal minority or that is what the majority right now of the community wants. But the reason why I like this analogy is because old D&D, the other side of that side that we're on, is that D&D is much more of a blank canvas. Well, your game is much more of the blank canvas, and D&D is all of the different types of paints and colors and paintbrushes. Whereas the new D&D is the booklet. It has the structure, it has the image, it has the start to finish, and it has the way that you get there, but you fill in the colors to make it look the way you want. Old school D&D was just, here's a paintbrush, here's 50 different paintbrushes, here's 90,000 different colors, and here's oil, acrylic, and watercolors. Here's a blank canvas.
Have fun.
You dip this into color, you draw on canvas. That was the instructions you got. You didn't get you may have been told in modules like a Bob Ross video, we're going to paint a castle today. So first you want to paint the land, then you want to paint the sky. But that was the rule. That was all you got, was instructions and vagueness.
I really do like looking at it as a Bob Ross video, because 10 different people watching a Bob Ross video and painting a Bob Ross painting are going to come up with 10 very different pictures.
It'll be roughly the same.
People doing paint by numbers are going to come up with the exact same thing, maybe with some slightly different color variations.
Exactly.
But they're all going to be the same. So that is, I like, because Bob Ross, he's going to be there. He's going to give you instructions. He's going to tell you what's going on. He's going to be like, here's the type of brush strokes that I'm using. But matter what you
can't match it.
Your brushstrokes aren't going to be Bob Ross's brushstrokes.
Exactly. That's
why
why
they're going to be your brushstrokes. So let them be yours.
That's why I like this analogy of it being the blank, because I think there's two sides of this, and some people want the blank canvas with all of the painting materials, and other people want the book with just different colored pencils.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing's wrong with that. But
again, like I said, like we've always said, if you guys are having fun, you're doing it right.
yeah, because
Freaking
guess what?
game
They're
on.
both entertaining. They're both your side project, and at the end of the day, you get a beautiful piece of artwork out of it. It's just that those that are on the canvas, let's face it, it's not that we're better. It's not we're better artists. You know, like
Sure.
I have an open world. That doesn't make me a better DM. It doesn't make me a better storyteller. It doesn't make me a better narrator. It's just it's the challenge that I enjoy. I would much rather have a blank canvas and work at my skill sets to be a good artist than paint by numbers and guarantee I have a good painting. But for me, it's not as enjoyable. Painting by numbers, even though I know the quality of the image will be perfect, it's just not as entertaining to fill in for me.
It's very interesting. Like, for whatever reason, this analogy came to my mind, but for me, it's very similar to the idea of cooking. There are some people out there that enjoy the art of cooking.
That's
They enjoy
me.
the like putting stuff together and like discovering like what I'm a paint by numbers kind of dude.
You just want the recipe.
I
Just-
want you to tell me exactly what to put together to get exactly the result that I want. And I needed to actually taste the way that I'm looking for it to
Mhm.
taste. I need someone to just give me the answer. It's like math for me. I just want the answer so I can get this. It's way more about the result than it is about the process.
Yes.
But for a lot of people, it's way more about the process than it is necessarily about the result. And I think that is a very, very important understanding to have. It's like, are you there for the result or are you there for the process?
I like that. That is actually one of the best ways to put D&D is you're either results oriented or you're process oriented.
Mhm.
Which is it?
Yeah.
I really like that. Do you just care about hitting the target and the bullseye, or do you care about how you're firing the bow and what bow you're firing? Like,
Sure.
there's a lot of different ways to do that. But yeah, are you results oriented? And I think that's it. Fifth edition is much more results oriented. Older
Results
school
focused,
is
yeah.
and the older school D&D was much more process, and that's fascinating. I
Mhm.
like that. Fuck it. I think we're gonna end it on that note. I think that's
we getting it
I
today.
think that's
That's
a great
beautiful.
epiphany note. This will also give people a little bit of time to go check out that video. I highly suggest it. Go watch that video. Like, follow, and subscribe to that individual. I forget their name, but he has a good channel. I've watched only like 2 or 3 of his videos so far. I'll probably end up watching more. Not everything that he makes is as good, but that particular video, I highly
business.
suggest it.
For sure.
Especially if you want to understand more about me and my understanding of D&D. It's amazing how much of what he said I knew without knowing the details. Like, just again,
Yeah.
my viewpoint of D&D and the way that I came up, it's great to see that I had so much influence from so many different backgrounds of D&D.
Mhm.
I really do feel very well rounded with what I know about it. So, but yeah, we're gonna end it there. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the history of Dragonborn. I hope you enjoyed the tangents. There are new emotes. We do have a February community stream, so I will in the next week or two get a poll in the Discord. If you want to be a part of that and you want to come check out the community stream, join the Discord. You will see the poll. You will be able to vote on fun stuff for us to do, as well as the topics in the future. I think we're probably going to have to do something in the well, there's a good chance we'll do something in the tavern, but it's either going to be a tavern focused one, or it's probably going to be another, like, either the subletting subclass. I have a feeling it's going to be subletting subclass, pop culture build, or it's going to be critical cocktails. I think those are the 3 that people have been mentioning offhand.
Sure.
So that's my prediction. It's going to be one of those 3 episodes. So there will be an episode vote that you can vote on the type of episode they will be, and then there will be a follow-up vote for topic and all of that. So make sure y'all get into the Discord for that. That's gonna be us for today. We have another review coming up on Monday, which is Cosmic's Item.
Mhm.
And yeah, we are back on our normal schedule. So no days off in the foreseeable future. So yeah,
Back to
if you
business
see
as
me,
usual, 2025.
pretty much, you are still shooting for Tuesdays.
Yes, indeed.
So again, we will keep posting in the Discord when Kage goes live for his development and programming streams on Tuesdays. We are still here every Monday and Friday, and then I just pop up for doing game streams weekends and sometimes during the week. So you see me online, come by, stop by, say hi, do all the things. But yeah, all the things. But otherwise, thank you guys so much. I do appreciate it. That's going to be us for tonight. I hope you guys had a good week, and I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend ahead of you. Cheers.
Deuces.